Hello, everybody, and welcome to Positive Fandom. I'm your host, Artem, and of course, we have Catherine Cooke with us today. How are you, Catherine?
Good.
Excellent. Thank you for joining me today, guys. We're going to be looking at Andor episode 10, which was an incredible episode. Catherine, I can't tell you how much I've been enjoying Andor, and it's an episode like this, which is exactly the kind of reason why I think people should be watching this series. And I know early on, people talked about the pace of this series and how they felt it was too slow. Some people have even said, they gave up after 3 episodes. No one said that this was the worst thing. That I haven't really heard that kind of a comment. I've heard them say that the pace was not quite what they wanted. Um, and I don't really know, since it's not the normal kind of thing where we could say this is how many people are watching it and we know for sure. With these streaming services, we don't have that ability to kind of tell, like we used to before, how popular a series is, what's going on. Regardless, I personally think this show is a hit. For people who haven't watched it, do you think that word of mouth will spread and people will start to watch Andor more?
Yes, especially once it's over with.
Mm-hmm. And, I know there are some people who are of the contention now where they're not going to wait every week anymore. They're accustomed to having episodes and everything loaded up in one day. And we do see that. And I think maybe it might have been Netflix that started to do that, or started that trend where we got everything all at once. But we've also found that there's a detriment when you do get everything all at once. You miss out on a lot of things, especially being able to do something like this where we can talk about one episode, hear everybody's opinion. It takes a few days for everybody to either see it, figure out what they want to say about it, or think about it, and then we can do a show like this. Whereas when they drop everything all at once, it's very hard to kind of do a show, or even kind of absorb everything and get accustomed to it. I noticed that in this episode, when it starts off, the first thing they pretty much show you is them closing up a body bag, which is it hasn't changed its name. And of course, we know what has happened with this situation, or at least I believe that might be one of the first things we see. And it's that poor guy who dies literally in the hallway. This is the last thing we were talking about. This poor old man who probably believed that he was going to be released pretty darn soon, was holding on, trying to keep things together. And of course, the irony of all of it is that that's the only way that you could get out of the prison, is through a body bag. And they kind of made that very clear with that imagery. They didn't have to show us that, but clearly that's what the doctor said. That's what everybody has come to the realization. But we also see that, in a sense, after Kino and Andor join, the group back together, or they're together, Kino still isn't convinced at this point at the beginning of the episode. Um, what do you think about the fact that Kino wasn't completely on board at the beginning of the episode, that we're anticipating will be a prison break because there'll be a new prisoner, which Andor is saying this is the perfect time to do it? What do you think of their choice to not necessarily have Kino fully on board yet?
Well, he's in denial, and he knows that if he does this, there's no going back from it. And he
Mm-hmm.
knows that or rather, he doesn't know what's on the other side of the door. So it's like, yeah, we could break out, but this place is an island. He knows he can't swim, so it's like, unless there's a ship we can take, where exactly are we going? Like, even when he eventually gives his speech, his voice is trembling. Like, he's not really even then giving in to what the reality of what they're doing. And so he is and I found that a bit believable, even though I admit, thought it was a bit annoying that he was quoting Andor verbatim in his speech at times. But yeah, he's just not really. It's like the reality of it is here. Is why he keeps saying one way out. It's like he's trying to convince himself that he can do it.
And from the way that these prisoners are, and I've heard a number of people talk about how, for the most part, the prisoners who are in there are probably non-violent, low offenders, if they are even offenders, which the majority of them probably are not offenders at all. They've probably just been collected and thrown into this, slave prison, so to speak. So you have people who, by nature, they're not going to get physical with one another, but they certainly will talk to one another and try and figure out what's going on. And they have this communication. We saw that the sign language thing. Was it inevitable that all the prisoners would find out? And if that was the case, Why would the guards and whoever makes the decision at the prison think that killing 100 people would be able to keep a secret when 100 people dying is kind of a lot of people to just kind of get rid of very quickly?
Well, it's that too, because it still didn't make sense why they killed him in the first place. It's like, okay, if you made a genuine mistake, then all you have to do is go back and send him out. There's no reason to kill everybody. That seems to be the real mistake that they made, because now that that rumor started spreading and they knew it was true, that was the final nail in the coffin.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that once the prisoner who was on 4 and ended up in 2 realized that he wasn't released, he went and told as many people as he could. They realized they were going to be there forever, and they had an uprising. I guess that's what it was. They didn't want to go ahead and say, yeah, there was an uprising and we handle it. They'd just say people got fried and it was a glitch or something. But we know for a fact what happened, because the prison doctor has told us the truth. He's the one informed person more than anyone, who probably goes all throughout the prison. Almost all of the people who were in this prison look either middle-aged or older, which I also thought was very interesting. And I think that probably they have a prison for the younger people and one for people who are middle-aged and over, and keeping certain age groups away from one another is a very good tactic, indeed, in order to control a population. So, I wonder to myself, was it inevitable that they would find out what was happening? And obviously that's going to have a huge effect over morale. So one of the ways that they are controlling these prisoners, obviously with the shock thing, but also with the morale of the fantasy of being able to get out of the prison. And so, you're building towards something, you're working towards something. And of course, they've kind of brainwashed people into thinking that, this is good. They can get out if they do what they're being asked to do. And of course, it was a promise that's not true. So, of course, at this point, we hear the speech that Luthen gave to Andor, and Andor gives to Kino, and Kino, of course, will eventually give to the entire prison. But with the anticipation of this, when they go back to their wards, so to speak, and I don't have the timeline correct. After the guy dies, they go back to the ward. Everybody's like, "What happened? What's going on? What happened in this? Tell us what happened." And these guys want to know. Like, this isn't a group that just doesn't want to be bothered. They want to know what's going out because they want to get the hell out of the prison. That's their motivation for wanting this information. And it was such a release when we heard Kino yell to everybody, "We're never getting out of here." And you mentioned that he was in denial, but clearly some of the men who were under his authority were not in denial, because the first day that Andor was there was when I think it's Melshi, I hope I'm saying his name right, walks up to Andor and says, "The number doesn't mean anything. We're never getting out." How long do you think some of those prisoners were there? Because I don't even think I think some of them had been there for years. What do you think?
Well, I don't think any of them knew about the scam yet, because if they did, then certainly everybody on the floor would know it was a scam, especially the Kino. But Kino didn't seem to know anything about it until the old man died. So I think it was just them assuming that they're never going to get out, just because of how absurd the sentences are. Like Andor, it's like, oh, this used to be a 6-month sentence, but now it's 6 years. It's like, well, it shouldn't have been any sentence because he didn't do anything wrong. It was just the incompetence of the scout troopers on the beach. So, and the fact that they probably have a mandate to kidnap people for slave labor. Yeah, I think they were just game. Like when Andor says, "Hey, let's go," and it's like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah, exactly. And so, at this point, now we know that Kino is committed to doing this. And once he says, "We're never getting out of here," and he says, "And we've got to figure out what we're going to do now," and it's going down. Like, it was like, yes, like, you just know. But Kino was the key. And I think it was very interesting. I feel like once Andor got into that prison, he immediately got a connection with Kino. And perhaps Andor represented, sort of like someone he's this guy who was free, but isn't going to, like, he's complying, but inside you can tell by looking at Andor, he's not complying with any of this. He's not okay with any of this, which most of them are, but he's not broken. So he's not going to just go ahead and say, we can't, we have to do everything we can to fight against this. He's not going to just go ahead and say, "I'm complying with it until my time is up." No, this is not something that sit right with Andor. And we do actually see in this episode where he makes an effort outside of talking to everybody, using some of the tools that they have on the factory, called the factory floor, to mess up some of the internal connections in this, you know, white prison, if you will, because it's everything's, all the walls are white. um and I thought that that was interesting, because he doesn't see this place, you know, the panels are up on the wall, but he knows there's something behind the panels, and he knows they gave them materials. The only time that he can work to try and get out is while they're on the factory floor. So he's 12 hours. Not only are they not listening to the prisoners, but they're not necessarily watching the prisoners. And we kind of learned that through Andor himself. I guess maybe they get bathroom breaks or whatever. But, you know, they kind of like can move from one section to another. And that's when Andor, I guess, maybe grabs a wrench or whatever one of these tools is. And we know that they're not necessarily looking at the prisoners because, or at least scrutinizing what's going on, is because, and they're leaving it to Kino to do that, because one of the guards kind of like, is it, how are things? And he looks down there and he says, yeah, things are great. Meanwhile, Andor is not on the floor. He's not working. So they didn't even notice that he was absent. And I think that that was also very relevant. Not only are they not listening, but they're not looking. So this was a very interesting.
Well, they're too complacent.
They are too complacent. It's a very cushy job. Whoever got, you know, they're like, oh, we got you this great job in a prison. No, you don't understand. This one's real easy. The floors are electrified. We can and control the prisoners that way. So now we know that they're going to be working towards this goal. And finally, Kino is on board, and every guy who's on his shift, you know, he talks about how we don't have to inform the night shift. They'll find out soon enough or whatever. And I remembered that it's a 12-hour shift. So while they're working their 12 hours and then they have 12 hours off to sleep or whatever it is they have to do, there's someone else who's up. And they had alluded to the day shift and the night shift, but it is very interesting. Now it's on. So we find ourselves, it's going to be the Great Escape. And we find ourselves back at the ISB and they're still talking about Kruger. I know nothing about this Kruger character. We know that there's supposed to be some special event that's going on there. Do you know anything about it? Who is this person? And, you know, why is this so significant? Who is this person? Do you know? Do we know?
This is the same person that the separatists that Luthen wanted Saw Gerrera to make an alliance with, and Saw was being stubborn and said, no, I'm not going to do it. But I don't think we've met this Krieger character yet in any of the other Star Wars media. I think it's an original character, and it'll probably be a surprise whenever we meet him, because now that it's kind of getting on the radar, that it's like, okay, so we know what to expect from separatist type of ideology, even though, like Luthen says, this doesn't really matter anymore. We should be in this together. So it tracks from the way the ISB investigation has been going that they're going to be following this, since they're going to use the pilot as the bait on the ship to try and lure this guy out. And I suspect that Saw Gerrera is either going to have a change of heart, or Luthen's going to do something to try and push him into it further by force, because Luthen makes it pretty clear in this episode all the things that he's willing to do in order to win.
Yes, and in the previous episode, we knew that somehow they had captured a pilot who divulged the information about Spellhouse, that there was going to be some incident. I could be saying the wrong location, but this rebel pilot divulged the information. They got the information. They were able to put the pilot, I guess, back in a ship. Someone picked it up. So nobody knows exactly what's happened, and that the Empire knows the details. But what makes this even more interesting is that I think it's Lino, who is one of the Imperial officers, says, you know something, if it were us acting just like normal operations, normal business operations, we would certainly go ahead and investigate this. And so Pataglatz, who has kind of like had a shine on for Dedra, now has kind of turned to Lino, and he says, yeah, you're right. Let's send some people there and take action on it, just like we normally would. And it is very interesting because, of course, this is the episode where we find out there's a little bit more to Officer Lino than meets the eye. And this is something that I think that the series has done a great job of showing us, that clearly so many of the resistance were insiders in the Empire. And I think that for a lot of people who are trying to figure out, there's been this big enigma with who is Luthen? Who is Luthen? Who is this guy? Where did he come from? What is his background? And people are saying, well, he has all these artifacts. Where did he get all the artifacts? And a lot of people are saying, or some people are saying, that like Lino, who's been, I guess, doing this position for the last 6 years, Luthen, who it's a revelation about this 15-year equation. 15 years ago, he realized something was wrong. 15 years ago, what was happening exactly in the Galactic Senate 15 years ago, if we go back and look at this, I think that what's essentially happened is that Luthen could sense that something was going on with Palpatine somehow. And we don't know what his relationship is to him. We certainly don't know anything else about Luthen other than that he has the best artifacts in the galaxy on his shop in Coruscant. So, it's like, what was Luthen's motivation? Is it can't just be an altruistic gesture. There must be something that's driving him, because we still don't have that. And we figured out that Vel's motivation was Luthen. He kind of sparked that in there. What do you think about Luthen now that we have a little bit more information about him? Do we have any more clues as to who he might be?
Not exactly, because when he gives the big speech at the end of the episode talking about, he says, like, idealistically why he's in the fight, but he's very careful not to mention any specifics. And he's also very careful not to mention his level of guilt in certain things, because he doesn't want, words getting out or anything like that. So it's kind of funny because what's that character's name? The officer Lino asks him, well, what have you sacrificed? And Luthen kind of took that as an offense, implying that even though he goes on this really colorful speech after that, but he still didn't answer the question. It's like, well, what did you sacrifice? The only thing he says, oh, my inner peace. It's like, come on, everybody's losing that. It's like, what did you, it seems like for the amount of passion that Luthen has, either he's just that morally good of a person, or maybe he did lose something a lot more personally he just doesn't want to talk about yet, or at least not talk about with certain people, especially informants or rats that he not necessarily can trust 100%, since he's meeting him down in, like, notice how he won't even come out of the elevator. Like, he doesn't even trust Luthen fully. He's like, no, I'm gonna stay in here. And he's like, no, you need to get on board with this. All of Krieger's men will be sacrificed to make your daughter your daughter will have a better life and all that. And it's like, okay, great, but why are you doing this? Like, how did you get this deeply involved, and what have you given up? And he kind of colorfully dodges the question, because a lot of people will say things like, oh, I've sacrificed so much, blah blah. It's like, no, you making other people lose things is not you sacrificing anything. You're not losing anything. It's like, what did you lose? Because we've seen how Luthen is complicit in effectively guilty by association of mass murder from what the Empire's done in retaliation for the Aldahani heist, and cracking down and doing all these horrible things and resulting in these people being imprisoned on these, bogus prisons, which I'm sure there's probably more planets with bogus prisons like this as well. And it's something that Luthen wanted to have happen. It's like, great, you're tormenting everybody else through this strategy, but what did you lose? And he doesn't answer it. So I'm really looking forward to finding out more about him and seeing his own loyalties and dedication put to the test. Because it's easy to say all these things and to be in favor of it when you're safely anonymous, kind of behind the scenes. Because so far, like you said, we really don't know much about him, only that he's on pretty good terms with Saw Gerrera in terms of their penchant for violence and being a bit more extremist. But I do look forward to seeing him either tested on it or finding out what his whole story is really about.
Yeah, those are very good points. And hopefully we'll find out soon. Cinta, who was one of the rebels who was involved in the Aldani attack, if you will, or heist, is still watching Marva in hopes of finding Cassian Andor. And she's keeping a close eye. A lot of people really care about Marva. She's a really important figure on, is it Morlani? She's a really important figure there, kind of high profile, but she's an elderly woman now. So she's not going to really be doing anything too significant, but she has that information that if I were Dedra, I would have gotten out of her right away. But Dedra said, no, she's not going to do that. And, that was her choice to do that. Cinta is watching Marva, but there's somebody else watching Marva, a man who seems to sort of like be on the sidelines while Cinta is there. He's wearing a hat and had a cape or whatever. Did you notice this? Who is this? What's going on?
Yeah, I'm not sure what that's about. Maybe it's a counterpoint by maybe Luthen, because again, he wants to close all those loose ends. And since he has an insider at the ISB, then maybe he's passed information to Luthen that, hey, they're watching this person, Marva, and now maybe he's sent somebody there to, close that loose end, because we've seen that he actually wants to like kill Andor. It's like, really? You're not worried about where he is? I get that you're worried that he could potentially be, spilling the beans out there, but wouldn't you be more worried because you want him to join you and don't want him to be lost? No, he was worried because he wants to kill him. So it stands to reason that if his informant at the ISB tipped him off that, hey, by the way, we're watching this Marva person who might have a lot of information, that he might want her out of the picture too. So that could be that. Because plus, there's still an element of mystery there because we still don't know what was going on Cassian's home world that she was so paranoid about other people discovering. So I think there's more to that story, and I don't know if they'll tie, because they stopped with the flashbacks pretty early on after just the first 3 episodes, and they haven't. Cassian hasn't had the opportunity to resume his search for his sister, so I doubt that they're going to wrap that story up in the 11th and 12th episodes. I think they'll probably save that for the next season. So I think that Marva should be safe to at least make it into early into season 2, unless she spills the beans in these next 2 episodes about what the big deal is about where he came from. But I think that mysterious watcher might be one of Luthen's hitmen, potentially, like looking for his in to get in there. It's like, I gotta, put. It's unfortunate, but that's what Luthen's said he'd prefer to do.
And it seems like Luthen's network is quite expansive on many worlds in many levels of the empire. He has informants in there. In society, in the Senate, he has a few people. Luthen is a multitasker when it comes to having this underground group. And he's also very careful in making sure that they don't know who he is and what he's up to and what they're involved with. Like, for example, when he was speaking to Lonnie wanted to know if they were involved in the Aldani heist. Oh, no, I'm sorry. There was some other, I can't remember what it was called. Maybe it was the thing on, in regards to where Marva is. But there was some other incident, and he said, Luthen, are you guys involved in that?
Well, he did mention the Aldahani heist at one point, and Luthen denied it.
Yes, okay.
He says, no, I wasn't as involved. Like, maybe tangent on the side. I didn't really know. I may have found out about it afterwards, but he was careful because he knows that even though this guy's his informant and he's got him wrapped around his finger, he still doesn't trust him fully, which shows that Luthen is very intelligent. At least he's not gonna, he keeps all his cards close. Like, I'm not gonna. You're on a need to know basis, and you don't need to know, so I'm gonna lie to you.
Absolutely. So I think it's very interesting that Luthen does try to keep part of his behaviors and things mysterious, except for maybe from Clea, who he seems to be really, really tight with. And I kind of like that there is someone who she's the one who had told him that he's slipping. And, even she seems very aggressive in the sense of what he's doing and how interesting is he hadn't heard from Lonnie for a year. She thinks it's a trap. There's just, and he's like, you're always suspicious. You always think it's, but she has to think this way because they're rebels. This is what's happening. They're fighting against such a big foe, or at least it seems like that's what they're doing. So I can understand that. Now, Mon Mothma. The last time we saw Mon Mothma, she certainly was having a tough time trying to figure out how she was going to handle this money situation. And it is really important in a sense to talk about this, or at least to have this as an issue, because not only are the imperial overreach regulations affecting somebody like Cassian being unjustifiably sentenced to a ridiculous prison term, but also something like even taking money out of your own bank account and using it for altruistic gestures. The empire is keeping tight wraps on everything. And she can't even, she has to somehow come up with the funds again to show that it's there, so that they don't know she used it for altruistic reasons. And it's very interesting. Her banker friend Tay can only get Davo, who is a gangster, who can lend her the money. And from what Davo said, Davo comes over. He doesn't look like a gangster. He looks like any other Shalandrian citizen, certainly well polished and coiffed. Like he looks perfect. It seems like the Shalandrians are, maybe the most perfect looking people ever. And he comments about how he'd been to this place before. This was a real kind of guess who's coming to dinner, but it really wasn't dinner. This was Mon Mothma freaking out. And Davo admits to having met her husband, which also suggests that her husband kind of knows everybody who you need to know. And Mon Mothma would never have anything to do with the people that her husband has to do with. And we saw that at one of his dinners. So there is that. But what I liked about it is Davos is a social climber. And, one of the hardest things to do is to climb into the upper class, to be part of the Mothmas. And he wants his son to have that association, as I think any parent would want their children to do well. But my question is, obviously he's a social climber. We know that. He has as much money as he needs, but he doesn't need anything else. But this is the one thing that's out of his grasp. And he needs the Mothmas somehow to bring his son into this level of acceptance. He asked for the daughter to kind of befriend his son. It's very interesting. But what I'm curious about is Davos is not a fool. He's not. And he knows that Mon Mothma is not a criminal. So he knows what Mon Mothma is doing. He knows that she's using this money to give food to people and that the Empire won't like it. Why on earth would Davos want to get mixed up in this business anyway, as somebody who is a criminal? Is he at heart a rebel? And how do you think he made his money?
Well, it was certainly implied in the previous episode that she was disgusted by the very notion of having to meet with him. Oh, he's a thug, blah, blah, blah. And he strikes us when he shows up as a very white-collar criminal. And I think the reason he wants his son to marry her daughter isn't just for social climbing, but then he could throw her under the bus. He could say, hey, look what she's doing, and then promoted, and hey, they're married, and since her husband he says he knows her husband, so, and given that her husband is clearly oblivious to what Mon Mothma is up to and is very pro-empire and all that kind of stuff, get Mon Mothma out of the picture, and hey, here's the husband, here's the Davos, the other guy with the money, and they have the marriage here. Look, this is the next dynasty coming on in. So I think he's maybe trying to play that con. Of course, we know that's not going to work because, or it might actually, because she's no longer apparently a senator by the time Rogue One comes along. I'm not sure exactly, because Bail Organa was still a senator at the time that the Senate was dissolved in A New Hope, but I'm not sure if the same can be said of Mon Mothma. I'd have to double check that. But I'm thinking that might be what he's doing, because I don't get the sense from him that he's altruistic or that he cared. Given that was his price, he could tell that she's absolutely disgusted by this, and yet that's what because she's like, oh, that's such an archaic, outdated tradition. I'm thinking, well, maybe that's why she ended up with her husband, because they seem to this doesn't just seem to be a bickering old married couple. They don't seem to be idealistically on anywhere near the same plane of existence. It's like, I wonder if she got roped into that sort of arranged marriage type thing as well, which is why she's like, no, we're not doing this again. But I think that might be what Davos is up to. Because if he was altruistic about it, I think he would have interjected and said, okay, I'll ask for something less or something. But the fact that he just accepts her rejection right then and there, despite that he's made this journey across the galaxy to meet over this, suggests to me that I think he's kind of slimy as well. I'm not sure if we should trust him. And now that he knows, or that it's clear now, if she didn't know before, that he knows what she's been up to, and more so what her friend, what's his name, has been up to as well, that's not good, So it'd be interesting to see where that goes.
Well, she definitely left herself exposed, so to speak, with what she's doing. He knows about her money, and he's kind of like was very sly and said, well, why shouldn't you be able to use your money for whatever you want to use it for? Almost implying that she's doing something wrong, and she's defend herself. Something, it's a charitable thing. It's charitable. And, this is probably what Mon Mothma has to deal with every day in the Senate, honestly. But, it's obvious to, I think, both you and I, that she is going to invite him over with his son to meet her daughter, who I think is 13 or something like that. And I have a feeling, Catherine, that the daughter is going to take a shine to this boy because her mother does not want her to. What will
Exactly.
happen between the daughter and the son? Will they run away together? Will it be a secret marriage? What do you think is going to happen?
I think you're right about that. She is going to take a shine to him, and maybe that'll be the last straw for Mon Mothma and her family, because I didn't get the sense that she even had a daughter up until this series. And I mean, sure, it's entirely possible, but I don't get the sense that her daughter's going to completely do an about face in the next episode or whatever. So I'm thinking that this might be the final straw for her time as a senator and with, her husband and his dealings with this guy. And I'm thinking now that it's not really a coincidence that they decided to drop Tales of the Jedi when they did, because it deals also with the corruption in the Senate. And now we're seeing simultaneously in this series how much the Senate doesn't really care about what she wants to do, even though we're told by the time A New Hope comes along that the Senate was just powerless. They were just like being puppeted by the Emperor. And yet, in a way, he doesn't really have to puppet them because they're so corrupt and self-serving. And I like how right when they're reminding the audience why Count Dooku went down the path that he did, they're simultaneously telling this other story about how bad the Senate has truly become, sort of validating Dooku's fears about what the direction the galaxy was going, even though he's majorly as a major hand and responsibility for the way things went.
Absolutely. Dooku almost, omits or forgets in his mind of how responsible he's been probably for 20 years, bringing the galaxy to the state that it is. And, for this to be the one thing that opens his eyes to listen to what's happening, I wonder about him a little bit in that regard, only because he's an intelligent man and he's from the upper class, right? Right, Catherine? So he understands how these political.
He was the Count of Sereno, and he left the Jedi Order at the time that he was set to inherit his massive wealth, because that would allow him finally to, not that he did it for the money, but because he already was an idealist, as we saw in Tales of the Jedi, but now that he has access to all of these resources to make his idealism a reality. But I love how they dropped those episodes right when we're in the thick of what's been going on with Mon Mothma and her frustrations with the Senate, because I certainly don't get the sense that she's going to be masquerading, because it is a good point, because I never really did think about if she was still employed as a senator at the time of Rogue One, and I certainly didn't get the vibe, at least from the way her husband and daughter are, that they would have been with her on Yavin 4. It's like, I really don't picture that. So if this guy, this criminal, decides to sell her up the river, that could be what forces her hand to finally, take off.
It certainly could be what causes that issue. And it's interesting, when we're looking at the politics of this. Sometimes there are deals that are made, and people know the actual reason why the deal was made. On paper, it could be because this is important to establish connections between one group or another. But in actuality, the real reason for it could be just that they need to transfer money. And when the money's transferred, none of it will go to who it's supposed to go to. Things like that, which I think are very interesting. And at this point are needed to kind of keep the population in check, although it's not working at the point where we saw Dooku and that senator get killed by his own people, more or less. But I also think the other thing that I think is also very interesting is that the particular Jedi wasn't able to protect that senator. Now, and that's why Dooku was there. I think they were going to retrieve her body and bring her back for her funeral, right, Catherine?
Yep.
I think it's very interesting was that someone was willing to kill a Jedi, to go as far as kill a Jedi and a senator. They had to make sure that either the Jedi or the senator didn't leave that planet alive. And so I thought that was very interesting. They weren't going to go ahead and do the strike yet, but they were willing to die for this.
And then even more telling is the fact that Mace Windu was pretty corrupt in that instance as well, because you could tell he's being very diplomatic as possible, even though you face some blatant corruption going on here. And that's why Dooku asked him when they get back, it's like, did you know you were going to inherit her council seat before we went on the mission? And he says no, but I don't believe that. It's like he lied. He probably knew that. Because like Dooku says, he congratulates him sometimes on his skills and on his morals, but criticizes him about his adherence to rules and regulations, and that's the problem. And we see that again with how they got played by Sidious so badly in the prequels, and how Ahsoka ultimately decides that, you know, this Jedi thing is not what you pitched it as. It's not, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, which is ultimately why Luke even comes to reject the old ways of the Jedi by the time the sequel trilogy comes around, and eventually, thanks to Rey, comes back around to seeing this is at the end of that film, Last Jedi, being the embodiment of what a Jedi should be, like Ahsoka wanted. Because like Ahsoka, I'd say, and Dooku are like opposite sides of the same coin, and that they both don't like the way the Jedi have gone. They both recognize the corruption that's been going on. But Ahsoka isn't going to be a violent tyrant about it. She's going to go off and try and help people and do things the right way, whereas Dooku went down a much darker path and doing things a very evil way. Because we still don't exactly know how long he was with Sidious, but the fact that he knew about Maul, and he's like, you let Maul go too far by killing Qui-Gon, because I'm like, wow, he actually knew that. Because at first I thought, well, if you believe Qui-Gon when he says he met a Sith Lord, then why didn't you go with him back to Naboo to confront this guy? And then you find out at the end, oh, you knew about Maul already because you've already been friends with Sidious. You just didn't think they would go that far as to killing him. So I thought that was kind of like, wow, you know, kind of a shock.
Yeah, it is. We are finding out some different things about the perspectives and let's say perhaps what really went down, so to speak, because we're seeing it now. And Dooku had kind of been a mystery for a little bit of time, but we knew he wasn't kind of like the ordinary Jedi. I mean, he didn't seem like a bad guy. You know, this is what was weird about him. You're kind of like, you're not supposed to, you shouldn't be a bad guy. You kind of like have this sense of wanting to do the right thing. And of course,
well, yeah, even Mace Windu, when Padme suggested that Dooku might have been behind the assassination attempt, he's like, no, he's a political idealist, not a murderer. He was once a Jedi. He could never assassinate anyone. It's like, well, clearly you don't know about the incident on the other planet where Qui-Gon had to stop him from assassinating a senator. And exactly. For whatever reason, they couldn't sense any inner turmoil going on within him.
Yeah, you know, and this is something that is very interesting, and of course we are given the information. We're intimated that it's Yaddle who sensed it at some point, and I don't know. I'm a little conflicted in regards to her demise that way for a number of reasons, but this is what they chose to do, and you know, I guess I have to just accept that that's what happened. But it is something to think about, you know, going forward in regards to that. And, you know, back on this prison, you know, things are about to explode now. They've had all night to think about how they're going to be doing this. And, you know, they're ready. And, you know, I don't know why I didn't think that perhaps they could come up with a plan to escape. You know, they have all these tools. Obviously, I should have thought, gee, tools can be used as a weapon. You know, I had no idea what they were going to do. All I knew was that when the elevator was coming down, Catherine, that they were going to jump and a few guys would probably get sniped off. But what I wasn't expecting was how hesitant the guards were. It wasn't until about a minute or so into this, you know, prison, you know, fight or outbreak or whatever you want to call it, that someone had said, make the floor hot or something like that. I don't even know what the
fry the floor.
Yeah, fry the floor, you know, and I thought about that. I was like, okay, great. You know, the first thing they want to do, they have a plan. You know, Andor is already trying to break in some of the machinery. And that seems like something Andor would do. Like that, didn't it feel right? You know, like you're like, you know, he's looking at a panel right now, or, you know, he's memorized all the schematics of this whole place by now. So what Andor was doing, whether everybody was on board with him or not, Andor was going to be Andor. You know, he was going to do things like this. Makes total sense. And of course, he needed Kino to be on board to say, you know, like, as I said, when they check the floor, they're like, is everything on the floor good? The guy looks down. Yep, everything's great. He didn't check to see if anybody was missing. They wouldn't notice. Everybody's dressed the same. It's very interesting that some of these things would work against them. As I said, not only are they not listening, but they're not looking. But it also hadn't occurred to me that by breaking the water line, it would allow them to short the electrical system. So everybody knows that the two don't mix. I didn't make the connection. And obviously he was looking for that water pipe, but
yeah, because water, when he's spilling it on the floor, would also be a conductor for the electricity. When they turned it on, because Kino's like, everybody get on the table. I didn't notice Kino getting on a table, because I mean, we see the one guy get fried, but Andor's also around the water, and he makes it as well, which is a little. I was like, okay, but it does eventually short the system so they could start making their escape, and it's kind of surprising that the central hub, other than frying the floor, don't really have the ability to. There's no backup power system override for this. It's like, wow, you're not only not listening and not watching, you're not even programming backups to your system. It's like, why on earth should there be a panel accessible to the prisoners to short out the electrical system for the whole prison block, And it's just that type of laziness.
It certainly was very foolish to make the panel accessible. I'm sure it took him 5 seconds to open the panel. And once he figured out which one was water, which I'm sure he did very quickly. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, he did it in a previous episode too. They showed him opening it and looking at it and already getting to work on it. So he's, this has been in the planning for a while.
And I'm sure I wouldn't even be surprised if the pipe said water on it, knowing how these situations are on there. So and you're right, when the water started to come in, and you said he said fry the floor or do the floor, some of the prisoners did get electrocuted. I think fortunately Kino was just outside of where the water was. So I guess the short or something about it, he wasn't exposed to it. It was just, the timing was very lucky, because let's be honest, in a regular scenario, they would have flipped the switch and everybody would have been killed.
Yeah.
So it was wonderful to see the water electrocute and the system get electrocuted and it get powered down. And the guys like with the switch are like, it's not working. It's not working. Like, it's just, it was so much fun to see everything play out. They used everything as a weapon. And yes, they did get sniped. Some of the guys, it was their last day. But it was just wonderful to see what was happening, and them use some of the tools to get out. And they successfully did that. So, they get to the bridge. And of course, here was the command by Kino telling the guy to turn off the entire station or part of it. And the guy won't do it. So he like snipes one of the guys, and then the guy's like, okay, I'll turn it off, and the speech that you talked about, I enjoyed, we knew they were going to turn everything off. We knew he gives this incredibly good speech. I enjoyed seeing some of the guards hiding, like they're hiding from the prisoners because they're like, F this, I didn't sign up for this. I'm not going to die just because these prisoners are here. I can hear the blasts, and I'm not going down like this. But honestly, this prison break, which feels very liberating, seeing these men run up what seems to be a bazillion stairs, and seeing even the doctor himself just in disbelief that this is happening as the prisoners are running and they're pushing each other and falling over each other. And it's like, we get this bittersweet moment where Kino's like hesitating, and Andor's like, we're here, we're out, come on, man, come on. And of course, we find out that Kino is hesitant. Was the fact that he couldn't swim the only reason why he hesitated, Catherine?
I don't know, because I noticed he also hesitated in not killing the two guys who were specifically in charge of frying the floors and killing all those other people. He kind of, in that whole time, even when they raided the hub, he was nervous, and he was still nervous when he's giving his speech. And I was expecting, because he was such a disciplinarian and was so firmly believing that he was going to finish his sentence and be off, that some anger would have come out when he realized he'd just been hoodwinked so badly. But it never does. So when they get to this exit, and he's like, I can't swim. And I'm thinking, well, even if you could swim, I'm looking at how far the distance is. And that's a long fall anyway. I mean, I don't picture elderly prisoners, one, having the energy to swim that far, let alone probably breaking bones on the fall because of how high that is. But he's kind of, it's bittersweet because he can't really make it out. But I'm thinking there's something else there, because I think we're going to see him again, because we last see him when Andor sort of accidentally gets knocked off very quickly. We don't get like a nice closure moment with him. Mm-hmm. It's making me wonder what he's going to do, or if we're going to see him again. And even when they finally get to shore, you only see Cassian and his other buddy make it. Like, I'm like, where is everybody else? I mean, granted, they were swimming in all directions, but there still should be several people, a lot of them, and there's nobody. And I'm not sure if they shut down the failsafe or they have the pumps sucking the water in like little whirlpools around. But I think you're right. There was something else going on, because he's like, I can't swim. but you've sort of been nervous this whole time through this whole rebellion, and even had to keep telling yourself one way out, just to kind of will yourself to do what needed to be done. And even Andor wouldn't. I mean, even though he shot the first guard in the hub, he didn't shoot the other two because it's like he's not fully comfortable with being cold-blooded yet. Like, or actually, he never really does get comfortable with it, because we saw in Rogue One when he shot the spy, he didn't really feel good about it. And even in the beginning of the series, when he shot the two security guards, it's like he even took a bit of a pause after he shot the first guy, but he spared them, and then even Kino kind of spares them, and it's like, I wonder if there is something else to this, and if we'll see him again. I hope we see him again, because I
Yeah.
believe we still haven't found out what they were building. I don't buy the theory that, oh, they build it on one floor and it gets disassembled on another, because why would the Empire go to the trouble of basically kidnapping people with bogus charges to just put them in a box where they just do nothing all day, basically? It's like, no, they're building something specific, and I wonder if it's other components for the Death Star project.
Yeah, they definitely are building something. This is not just pointless things that they're doing. And I obviously think that, I don't know whether Kino jumped. I don't think he pretty much made it clear he wasn't going to jump. So I don't think that he would jump. I don't think he's going to get pushed off the ledge like Andor did. The real question is, I mean, I guess there's some options. If he got free, where would he go? But is the most likely scenario that he'll be somehow captured, and somehow he'll be led to Dedra and interrogated. What do you think?
Well, I think that given this prison break, it'll finally get them to shine a light on, okay, what exactly happened. They'll find out that, and this is how they're going to find out that Andor, or this is how Dedra is going to find out that Andor was at this prison the whole time, and she's going to be really upset about that and get there. I don't think Kino would betray him, though. I think he would probably rather die. That he's going to be really upset at that point. But I wonder if there's other controls inside that central hub that he could take advantage of, because there's certainly more than just frying the floor and opening the doors. Like, maybe he could summon a ship or distress signal, like something, because I believe a signal had already gotten out, but I don't think he's just gone. Like, because we didn't see Cyril this week either. We haven't developed that storyline. So I take it that now that we have the whole issue with what's going on with Krieger and this little con they were playing over here, and now the prison break over here, it's like, I think there's definitely going to be a big cliffhanger at the end of this season, because they're not going to wrap up all those stories in just the next episode, or the next two episodes. So I do hope that Kino will be back. I don't think he's going to sell out Andor, but it's difficult. I'm not sure what's going to happen to him.
Yeah, this is a very good question. And, I think Andor is also wondering, he knows it's not over almost, that Kino has a little bit more. Perhaps Kino was holding back something. So that is perhaps something that we don't know about Kino.
Yeah, because we don't know why he's there or how long he was at that prison. Just because Andor got there for bogus reasons doesn't mean everybody did. There could be something, like he might realize, oh, if I break out of here, I'm still a fugitive, probably not just of the Empire, maybe of other places. Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? Or maybe he's somebody who's been there so long that he's like, how do I adapt to life on the outside? Like, what am I going to do type thing? Like, this has been my life for so long. But who knows? I take it we'll find out in the next two episodes.
Definitely. And, I guess to kind of wrap this up, back to Luthen. Luthen is meeting with Lonnie. And, we did kind of briefly talk about this, him as being an operative there. And Luthen has his moment in the sun when he talks about the sacrifice, and how it's, I guess, 15 years of 15 years ago, he wanted to fight against injustice and everything, which we did talk about, that he sacrificed everything. Luthen has a way of talking people into doing things that they don't necessarily want to do. But honestly, you must have a lot of balls to decide that you're going to be an Imperial officer, and you're not the officer, you're actually a rebel spy. And I really liked the attention that he gave, in the sense of saying he obviously wanted them to make the attempt on Kruger because he needed to get off of the base, or the ISB, out of the office, to meet with Luthen. So that was actually his motivation for even saying that. He says, okay, I'll go do it. But maybe he wasn't even going to go to where the thing was going to take place. But you had mentioned something very interesting, that it's true. In the end, they let us see Cassian and Melshi running away. Why do you think it? I mean, we knew since we already know they get away. In particular, these two guys, we know they get away. Why was it so significant to show us them running away in this particular circumstance? Like, what was the importance of showing the two of them running away and where they were located? I have to wonder what the significance of that was, since we already know that they get away.
Well, one is to show that they're the only two there. Like, where's everybody else? And secondly, we see that it looks like a long, desolate kind of landscape with a few like sketches, like, and the moons are out there. It's like, where are they going and what are they going to do? This doesn't look like there's any civilization out here, which is the whole point, that there's not supposed to be civilization. It's like hiding at this prison out here. So it's like, oh geez, how are they really going to get out of this? It's like, okay, you escaped the box where if you cooperated, you would at least live, but now you're on your own in this, what looks like unforgiving wilderness. Like, I didn't see much vegetation. It looked almost like the surface of the moon, and they're just running out there. And it's like, okay, you did it, but now what? Because we know that there's going to clearly be an Imperial outfit sent out there to investigate and seek out the survivors. And I take it that most of them will be killed, because if there's no obvious avenues of escape from the planet, then, and no obvious resources for them to immediately draw upon them, what are they going to do to keep themselves alive and energized to keep away from probably shock troopers or death troopers, whoever they're going to send to round them back up, or possibly just send them right back to the prison. Well, not back to the prison, because they're not going to work now, but who knows? So it's kind of like, ooh, this might backfire in a way.
Yeah, it's something to think about. And we already know that, as I said, they get away because we see them in Rogue One, right? So we kind of know what their fate is, but I thought it was interesting that they specifically wanted us to see that. I'm guessing that planet, I could be wrong, looked very much like when they would kind of like scour a planet, or when the Empire would kind of punish a planet by, they're not going to destroy it, but they didn't just completely destroy the planet, but they destroyed the topography of the planet, the surface. So it's like they're scouring the surface of the planet as a punishment, or they just want to destroy the surface so nothing will grow there. And they did it to a lot of planets, right? So this looks like that might be one of those planets, because you can see like these posts in the ground, and I'm thinking that must have been like the footing of a building or something at one point, but everything is gone, and it's like way too gone for it to just be sort of like a collapse or something.
Yeah, like they did a scorched earth policy once they decided that this was going to be a good location to build this prison.
Yeah. And so, there is that. So, I have to wonder about that. And of course, we were told he was going to Narcana 5. I guess this is Narcana 5. Did we ever find out anything else? Maybe that they renamed that planet, but did we ever find out anything else about Narcana 5 that was significant?
Not that I recall. This is that just being the prison planet where he's sent. And it's not clear how many of the, because like Andor was in a line of people being sentenced for different things. So I'm not sure if the judge just gets like a notification on their like iPad or computer or whatever that says, oh, this person gets this sentence and you're going to send them here. It's like, okay, like she didn't seem to know what was going on. It was almost like, okay, yes, it used to be 6 months, 6 years. Like she was very blasé about it. So I'm not sure exactly how they actually select which prisoner is going to go where. But the fact that this planet, I'm sure it must have meant something at some point. And who knows, maybe it ties into Luthen, because again, we still have that question. What did he sacrifice? What did he lose? And you could tell there was a lot of passion when he was really upset when Lonnie asked him that, which suggests that, okay, clearly it's not just you sacrificing your inner peace. It's like, obviously you lost something. And when he says 15 years ago, that takes you back about to, depending on how much time has passed so far in this series, it takes you back about to episode 3 or like a year or so after it. So I wonder, maybe he was from there, and his home and stuff that were just wiped out. Who knows?
Yeah, that's I hadn't thought about it. It'd be like people, Cara Dune signing up because Alderaan was destroyed, and she's going to be a drop trooper for the rest of her life and be committed. because of what the Empire did to her home planet and destroying it. So that does make sense, and that would be a great motivation if that was his home world and something had happened to it like that. So, I think that it also indicates that the Empire is a little bit more ahead of the schedule since he knew about it. Maybe they were already doing things like this, and that became the motivation, and he could see down the line. Perhaps that was the indication. Maybe he didn't know what the Emperor was going to do, but he maybe knew, or that the Senate was going to be dissolved, but he got a sense of what they were doing in regards to the galaxy. And so if they could get away with certain things, and maybe he could see it was a domino effect from planet to planet to planet. Now he sees what this means going forward. So that is something to think about. Now, as far as I'm concerned, this was an excellent episode. One of the best. I enjoyed it immensely. I'm wondering what else we're going to find in Luthen's shop. We did see, and I don't know if I mentioned it, we saw what everybody is saying, maybe Senator Amidala's headpiece in Luthen's shop during one of the scenes when he's speaking to Clea. Did you happen to catch that?
No, I didn't.
Well, I'm going to see if I can just pull it up really quickly, because as far as I'm concerned, this is kind of the fun stuff that I've been enjoying, seeing what he has in there. And, certainly, when you see these things, I really wasn't expecting to see anything like this, but to see that, it's really just such a pleasure to see those little things. So if I can just bring it up here, and there it is in the screen here, I think you can see between them, everybody's saying that might be Senator Amidala's headdress.
Yeah, removed of the red diamond, red whatever because the headdress, as I recall, had more. The headpiece had like these red, like bright red, like jewels or things in it. So, and that might be it.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that, specific items that they're putting in there. And I wondered whether the items had clues. I noticed that I didn't see the holocrons anymore in the shop, and I'm guessing maybe somebody picked those up. Unfortunately, I kind of enjoyed seeing those holocrons in practically all the episodes when we saw Luthen there. So there was that. And then they also talked about some other things. They said the headdress looks exactly like one worn by Padme. But the other thing that I was going to say is, and maybe it is the last thing that I'm going to end with talking about, is when getting this warning from Lonnie, he also tells Luthen that Dedra is looking for him. And although Luthen lies to him, I don't think Lonnie believes Luthen. I think Lonnie is smarter than, this situation. And of course, Luthen appears to have the upper hand, but Lonnie is not a fool. Is Lonnie going to betray Luthen?
Probably, because he didn't seem very happy when Luthen gave his big speech saying, "No, you're stuck here forever," type of thing. And so I think he might give him up, and that will probably backfire tremendously. Because I don't picture Luthen going out in the next 2 episodes. I think he'll be around for season 2, because there's just too many storylines. Like what's going on with him in the ISB investigation, what's going on with Andor, what's going on with Marva, and what's going on with Andor's past, and what's going on with Saw Gerrera and this Krieger guy. So, and Cyril. so
presumably, Saw Gerrera.
I'm genuinely at a loss as to what the next 2 episodes are going to be, because there's so many different directions they could go for the story.
That's true. And presumably because Saw Gerrera, let's say in the last episode, said he wasn't going to meet with Krieger. He said he wasn't going to. We don't really know if he does meet with Krieger. So there's a possibility that they're expecting Krieger to just be there, and Saw Gerrera might be there too. And it could be a very dangerous situation. If Saw does change his mind, I don't think there's anything that Luthen would say that would make Saw go to meet him. But I think Luthen on his own volition might decide, okay, let me meet with him or warn him, maybe not warn him, but find out what's going on. But it seems like Saw is the most informed individual, if not Luthen. about what's going on. So he's the person who I wish we would get kind of like the 411 from. Of course we can't, but you know, it would be great to kind of have to you know, go up to Saw and ask him these questions. But I just enjoyed this so much, and I have no idea what's going to happen. Um, I'm just thrilled for the next episode, which is in a few days, Catherine. But Catherine, you have any last thoughts on episode 10, season 1 of Andor?
A lot of surprises. I still think Kino's going to be back. I think if we should get more hints as to Luke, because I'm trying to think of what the cliffhanger is going to be, because it doesn't seem at this point like they could tie off a single storyline in a nice little bow, or like the whole season as being a storyline. Feels like it's gonna, because we know there's gonna be time jumps going into the next season and there on out. So I am kind of curious, but I do wonder if things start going awry, and maybe that's what's going to prompt Saw Gerrera to take action. Because yeah, his beef with Krieger be damned. It's like he's not just gonna sit around doing nothing, because we know that by the time we get to Rogue One, he's, you know, more machine than man, as people will say. So I take it, and he was also, you know, displayed prominently on the poster like he's a major player, and so far he's not. He's been in one scene, and I'm like, he's got to do something that's going to turn the tables probably upside down for our characters coming in the next couple episodes here.
I agree. I think that we are going to see some amazing. Well, obviously, we know there's going to be an assault on Krieger. So that's one of the events that we know is happening. So there's no doubt about it. That's happening. We also know that when Mon Mothma's daughter and this young guy meet, something's going to happen there. So that's something that, you know, the tables turning and everything is happening is going to come to fruition. Something's going on with Marva. But we, you know, she's being observed. That other man, that mystery man who's on the planet watching what's going on, I'm trying to figure out who that guy is. So those are kind of three things that I see in the horizon. So, you know, it's anybody's guess what else may be occurring. Um, so I'm so excited for this. And Catherine, thank you for joining me for this review of episode 10 of season 1 of Andor. Catherine, where can people find you?
You can find me Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Sly Snide. You can find me every second and fourth Sunday in the month on the Virtual Cantina Network YouTube channel at 8 a.m. Pacific as a co-host of the Unifying Force, a Star Wars talk show. And you can find me every Wednesday night just about on the Phantasmagorium show, where Scotty and I review all sorts of movies. We're currently seeking into the Robert Rodriguez portion of our current series, and later on we'll be moving on to other exciting things.
Well, that sounds fantastic. And guys, you know, you can always find me here on Positive Fandom or on the Post Geek Singularity, as well as the 1/6 Scale Man Network and Midnight's Edge. So on behalf of myself and Catherine, thank you for watching the series. We are going to review the next 2 episodes right here on Positive Fandom. So please do check that out. And for everybody out in the galaxy, no matter where you are and no matter what you're doing, always, please be kind. Take care, everybody.